So it's about time I made a designated video that dissects the stats involved in the game of life. For anyone who's new here, I do a bunch of stuff, to put it briefly, and everything I do is for the purpose of increasing the stats for my main character in the game of life. However, I'm yet to make a designated video that explains the significance/importance of each one. So that's what we'll go into today. Stat 1, Career. The dark blue stat used in my brand logo and YouTube banner. The one with the man in the suit. Your career. Now what a career is, briefly, is a certain type of job that allows progression, promotions, and pay raises. Generally, it requires some sort of formal training beforehand, such as an apprenticeship for trades, a degree for many white-collar jobs, or even a TAFE qualification. This is not always the case, such as getting into management roles at a supermarket chain, but generally, going to uni or getting an apprenticeship is what most people think of when they hear about a career. What separates a career from a standard job is the ability for promotions and thus pay raises. You also have an element of job stability too, since you require at least some level of skills/training/education to get into a career. It creates a barrier to entry. So by getting a trade, getting a degree, etc., you now have something that many other people don't, which locks them out of being able to take your job.
They took our jobs!
Example, we need heavy diesel mechanics to work in the mines. If you get your heavy diesel apprenticeship, you now have a skill that not many others have. There are jobs required that involve fixing those big-ass machines, and these are needed to keep the mines operating, which keeps Australia's economy going, meaning I can enjoy a higher standard of living thanks to those working in the shit conditions in the desert, whilst I sit in my climate-controlled office gig and work in my climate-controlled supermarket gig on the weekend. Now guess what? I can't take their job. I don't have those skills. I didn't get an apprenticeship in that field, so the heavy diesel mechanics jobs are safe from someone like me. Let's flip the example. I work in accounting. My job requires a degree and a further qualification known as CPA. Certified Practicing Accountant, as it's known here in Australia. The US calls it Certified Public Accountant, I think. The United Kingdom has some other designations, and we also have Chartered Accountant here in Australia and New Zealand. But all you need to know is there's a degree, and then there's more. Now actually my job, my specific job that I have now, doesn't actually require a CPA, just the base degree, but that's not relevant to this video. Case in point, I need certain education for my role. So, I have a bachelor's degree in commerce with an accounting major. Guess how many people have this? Probably a few, but it's not like everyone has this. That heavy diesel mechanic working in the mines can't take my job. He doesn't have the requirements to work in my role. The same way I can't do their job. So not only do both examples here require some sort of training/education, they also lock out a significant majority of the population, since the significant majority do not possess the requirements needed to work in our respective fields. Now, since jobs such as these are required for society to function, and they also have a high barrier to entry, naturally this increases the demand for these workers and skill sets. And unless supply of these workers floods the labour market, then naturally wages/salaries get pushed up, since employers/companies need these workers, but the supply often doesn't keep up, hence why you get pay raises. Now that's an oversimplification of it, but it really does come down to the supply and demand thing. Workers in the mines here in Australia get paid a boatload. Now they do provide a valuable service to the economy, and as mentioned before, their work increases the prosperity for Australia as a whole, but their work conditions are awful. 12-hour shifts, day and night, in the middle of the desert, sweltering conditions, you have to miss a lot of events back home, you're not home every night, the list goes on. So as you can imagine, there is less people willing to work these jobs, hence why the salaries are super lucrative. There's also an element of needing to know someone to get into the mines in the first place, which locks out the part of the population that does want to work in these conditions for the pay, but that's overcomplicating things for the sake of this video. Another example is accounting. When I graduated in 2019, the starting salaries for accounting graduates were around $40,000 to $45,000 a year. Insultingly low for someone who's just spent 3+ years studying and gone into debt. But you work your way up, and plus, you don't provide much value to an organization fresh out of uni anyway. You could get $50,000 a year if you worked for a bigger company with higher expectations, but for the most part, you could expect $40,000 to $45,000. Now recently, in 2022 to 2023, I've seen grad salaries as high as $60,000 to $65,000. I thought at first maybe this is due to inflation, cost of living pushing everything up, thanks central banks. But this is not actually the case. On the accounting subreddit forum, I've seen posts from people talking about their starting salary like 10 years ago. In a lot of cases, especially Canada, it's barely moved, maybe up like $3,000 a year from like 10 years ago. Reason is, the supply of work is kept up. Yes, demand for accountants has increased as the economy grew, but the number of accounting students also kept up. So why would companies increase their starting wages? Oh, this guy doesn't want to work for $40,000 a year? No worries, someone else will. But from what I've also seen on the accounting subreddit forum is that not many people are getting into this field anymore. They're getting into tech. Smart choice, tech pays more, that's just a fact. But that obviously means there's less accounting students graduating, meaning less accounting grads. So some firms want/need lesser skilled accounting staff to do the mundane stuff, or even just to help with the workload but pay at a lower rate. But where's the staff? Where are the uni students? Guess what? They're mostly going into tech. And also, the myth that a degree is necessary and trades are bad is slowly being dispelled, so some students who would have gone into accounting 8 years ago have now decided to pursue a trade instead. Thus, lesser supply of white-collar workers, and those pursuing white-collar roles are skewing towards tech. So lower supply, but same, if not higher demand, pushes up salaries/wages. Now, the supply/demand thing can also be applicable to the mines. On the Men's Financial Advice page on Facebook, there are a lot of FIFO workers. Fly in, fly out. Fly into the mines and then fly out. Once their rotation is done, they fly home. From what I've seen, the salaries in the mines are actually lower than they were in the early 2000s. Some older guys were like, I'm surprised how low the mines are paying these days, which is nuts since a lot of them are paying upwards of $150,000 a year. So why is this? Australia's economy has grown since the early 2000s. Demand for our commodities has increased. So why haven't the salaries increased much? Because the supply of workers has basically kept up. I said before how not many people want to work in the mines due to shit conditions, which is true, but enough people are willing to work in the mines so that they can keep their operations functioning. Hence why apparently wages have stagnated. In fact, apparently they've gone backwards. Now, there's also probably a lot of union agreements/mining company shenanigans involved, and like $150,000 plus a year is plenty enough money as it is. So although that somewhat contradicts the earlier example of a diesel mechanic has salary progression, and then I said mining pay has apparently stagnated, the point stands that getting a skill set in an in-demand field is a career since it allows you to receive a salary you wouldn't have been able to receive otherwise. Would you rather get your apprenticeship than earn $165,000 a year for the next 10 years? Or would you rather work at a fast food establishment for $45,000 a year, but that eventually goes up to $50,000 a year in 10 years due to minimum wage increases? I'd imagine you'd rather the stagnant $165,000 pay than the $45,000 pay that slowly goes up. Getting a skill set that allows you to receive a salary you wouldn't otherwise be able to receive is probably a better way of explaining things. My current job pays around $78,000 total. I couldn't get this at any other low-skilled role in my area. I can't get this at my weekend supermarket job unless I got into management. So that's the crux of it. A career is a job in a field that requires some level of extra training. It allows you to receive salaries/wages at a higher rate than you would otherwise have been able to get in a lower skilled role. You have certain job titles, there's room for upwards progression in the role, and there's a higher barrier to entry to work in that field. Example, an accountant is a career. You need something extra to get into that field that a lot of people don't have, aka a bachelor's degree with a major in accounting, you have titles and promotions like junior accountant, senior accountant, financial controller, CFO, etc. Your pay goes up as you get more skilled/experience and can provide more value to a business. The skills/experience that many people don't have. So, you can demand higher pay. Since the organization needs your skills, the labor market requires some skilled accountants, so your pay goes up over time. Another example are like doctors and anesthesiologists. Lots of training required, lots of demand for the work, so they can demand $300,000 plus a year or whatever they earn. This work has a shorter supply of workers than the accounting field. It's in more demand than accounting and requires a higher level of skill, hence why they earn more than us accountants do. Contrast this to my weekend supermarket job. No skills required, it's on-the-job training. And for the most part, it's easy to learn. Some of the stuff I do when covering the managers is more advanced, but in most cases you don't need to know that sort of stuff to work there. So not a whole lot involved in getting work in my weekend supermarket role. There's also low barrier to entry. Anyone can work that job. I suppose I basically just said that. So there's no apprenticeship/degree required. Hence, the supply of workers is easy to come by. The demand for our work is there, but for the most part, it's not a huge deal if you're one staff member down. If you're one staff member down in accounting, that potentially costs you thousands in terms of being unable to finish a client's audit reports in time, or even not submitting a tax document on time, resulting in heavy fines. If you're one staff down for a surgery, potentially someone loses their life. If you're one person down in the supermarket, a few packs of red meat aren't on the shelf for some customer, so now they have to get something else to eat. Boo-hoo. Or well, not boo-hoo, maybe now their diet plan is ruined. So hopefully you get the point now. This is why career is an important stat in the game of life. Job stability, since there's high barrier to entry, along with other factors, generally results in pay raises which you wouldn't really get at lower skilled roles. So even in cases where you're not at work in your career field, but you're doing an unpaid internship, studying, building up your resume, preparing for job interviews, etc., you're increasing your career stat. Stat 2. Money. We've got to have money. Okay, pretty self-explanatory this one. You need currency to buy stuff. As is the case with many video games, you need the stuff to continue on your quest/continue your exploration. Now we did just talk a lot about careers before. Obviously that involves money, but not everything involved with increasing money relates to a career. As you probably gathered from the last segment, well, I mean, if you're a regular, you already knew this, but anyone who's new here, I work full-time as an accountant and part-time at the supermarket. The supermarket job has minimal carryover to my career. Yes, there are some transferable soft skills, and some of the tasks I cover for management from time to time have some crossover to an office job. But when I work on the weekend, I don't consider this an increase to the career stat. It's purely an increase to the money stat. Well, it can somewhat be an increase to the aesthetic stat. I'll talk about that in a future video. But making money from a second job unrelated to your career obviously doesn't increase your career experience. You can also make money from other methods not relating to your career or even work, as outlined in this video. So if you're doing something for the sake of money only, such as filling out paid online surveys, participating in a medical trial, winning at sports gambling, these will be an increase to the money stat. A very important stat in the game of life. Stat 3, defense. Okay, so this one hasn't been talked about much in a while, and that's because it kind of gets covered in a career. I talked before about job stability, high barrier to entry. That's kind of what this is, but it also encapsulates my second job at the supermarket. Yes, the barrier to entry is low at that job, but once you're in, you're in. The supermarket doesn't hire every day of the year, they hire in bunches. And as you can imagine, since it's low barrier to entry, there's a lot of candidates. So it's a double-edged sword in a way. You don't need any skills to get in, but neither does anyone else. I got this job 11 years ago, and the only reason I was considered was because the store was specifically looking for employees at that time, and I was also 15, meaning I was cheap. I also had 4 jobs prior to the supermarket, so I had experience. In the interview, I also said that I wanted to work there since they were open all the time, unlike my other 4 jobs I had before, which only had specific times I could work. Example, my first ever job as a basketball referee, You could only work after school during the school days. No public holidays, no school holidays, or weekend work. My second job at the chicken farm was weekends during the late morning only. No afternoons, no nights, no school holiday shifts, nothing. My third job as a kitchen hand was also weekends only. My fourth job was only when the football team had home games. Now, I don't think this was the answer they were looking for. They probably expected something along the lines of company values, blah blah blah. But since the supermarket staff are often lazy, they know how hard it is to find people who are willing to work. Basically, people apply for the job at the supermarket, but then they just don't want to work once they're in. So anyway, the ultimate point is, once you have a supermarket job, as long as you don't do anything too stupid, you can't get fired. You don't even get fired for being a bad worker, you just get lower priority for shifts when they want them covered. And in some cases you get transferred to another department. I've seen that quite a few times at my stores. Some guy sucked at being on the registers, so they chuck him in the produce section. He sucked at that, so they chucked him in the deli. He sucked at that, so they chucked him on long life. So like, you literally get moved around if you're a shit employee, you don't get fired. So supermarket jobs, super stable. Now, as we all learned in the pandemic, supermarket jobs are super stable, and they'll always be needed. Even when they implement that new scan and go thing, they will still need staff to help out. And until they figure out how to self-serve delis and automatically stack fridges, my job is safe. I did hear that the company was trying to make like pre-made shelves. Like they'd literally stack shelves in the warehouse and then import them into the supermarket. But if you look at the logistics of this, I'm not sure how this will be feasible. Like, are you going to wait for the shelves to be completely empty first? Surely not. You will replenish the shelves as you go. And in my case, since I work with the fridges, you're not going to put in a new fridge every time. Surely you just keep the same fridge. And once again, if you try and pre-stack something, it doesn't work unless the shelves are totally bare. Case in point, we will need supermarket workers going forward. So my second job is also super stable. People will need groceries no matter how bad the economy is. So I'll always have that job. There'll always be work in that field. A super stable source of income. So this is a way to look at my supermarket job. You could get any second job really. Any of them would increase the money stat. But a supermarket job in particular is super stable. Hence the defense stat. Stat 4. Aesthetics. This refers to your looks. Generally this is related to anything gym and diet, but it encapsulates stuff like your face and hair too. Example, I get laser hair removal on my neck, body and pelvic region. This has basically removed any shaving rashes except for on my neck, since I think those are low-key permanent. And it's saved me bucket loads of time. Instead of having to shave all over twice a week, I only need to shave once every 2 months before another laser appointment, since the hair regrowth is now minimal and patchy. I also get Botox. No, this isn't the lip fillers or cheek fillers or whatever. I use it for anti-wrinkling purposes. For some reason, my forehead creases really badly. It literally makes me look at least 8 years older. I'm 27 at the time of making this video. Every new person I meet at my supermarket job literally thinks I'm in my early 20s, and I prefer to keep it that way for as long as possible. So I get Botox once every 3 to 4 months. It keeps the forehead wrinkles at bay. I also use minoxidil to prevent further hair loss. I may consider finasteride and dutasteride in the future, but for now at least I haven't noticed my hairline going back any further. I'd like it to regrow forward, but I can make do with my current hairline since it's easy to fake with my longer hair and my hairstyle. So any time, effort and costs relating into looking better, whether that be going to the gym, certain foods in your diet, any cosmetic work you get done, all this increases your aesthetic stat. So when I spend around 2-ish hours, usually a bit less at the gym every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Saturday night, I'm not making money, I'm not progressing my career, but I am increasing a stat in the game of life, that being aesthetics. When I follow my diet, not only does this save me a heap of money when you consider alternative foods, but it's increasing the aesthetic stat by filling the macronutrient and micronutrient objectives that my body requires in order to function optimally and grow. When I go out of my way to travel 45 minutes to my Botox lady every few months, I'm spending money on petrol, and I'm not using that time to go to the gym, to study, to make money, etc. But I am still leveling up an IRL stat in the game of life, that being aesthetics. Yes, I wasn't able to gym that night, but I was able to get some cosmetic work done, so the aesthetic stat still went up. Now, this stat is important since just being healthy will save you a lot of money in your future, and your mental health is way better when you look good, amongst other benefits, but I'm sure you don't need me to tell you why looking your best is beneficial to you. I see a fair few people online making a fair bit more money than I am at my age, but they've achieved this by being a massive workhorse. And it's come at the cost of their health. They don't look 27, they look 40, they're overweight, and they often aren't good with investments. I'll talk about that later. But they're pissing away their money, which is fine, live your life, but you're busting your ass at the expense of so much else. And that money you're earning is going to enjoying yourself on the time off work. You're living in the moment. It's a cycle, where they work hard, but they play too hard. They don't have much money/investments to show for it. You'd be better off taking it a little easier, like I am, and just getting into appreciating assets. I'll elaborate later, but in my case, I've had job offers paying $15,000 or more per annum than my full-time job is paying right now. But I'm accepting the pay cut at my current job for a more relaxed workplace, which allows me mental space to work on other stats that will probably reap way more benefits in the future than that extra $15,000 would now. Of course, $1 today is more than $1 tomorrow, but it's not like I'm choosing to be flat broke now to make more money in the future. I'm still on good money now, just not as good as it could be, but the potential income ceiling in the future makes up for the losses now. But I'll talk more about this in another video. I could spend ages dissecting my philosophy on my grind and my choices, but for the sake of this video, your aesthetic stat is important. But don't completely forego a career so your biceps can be 1.5 inches bigger than everyone else's, but also don't focus on becoming the head executive of a big company at the cost of your health and looks. Have some balance between all the stats. Speaking of, let's go to the next stat. Stat 5, Investor. This stat refers to multiple areas. This encapsulates stock trading, learning about the stock market, real estate, or just general financial literacy. Some people would group financial literacy in the money stat, which you could argue for, but I keep it here since I refer to financial literacy more so in the sense of economic policies, how the global economy impacts you, etc. Not the basic stuff like save 20% of your payslip, don't buy something because it's on special, etc. Those are fine to have. In fact, they're good traits to have, but that's not the level I'm referring to with this stat. So whenever you make a swing trade, that's an increase to your investor stat since you've now had more practice in this type of stock trading. You can argue that it's an increase to the money stat, but since I don't usually pluck out any money at this stage and just keep it all in the stock trading app, there's a very real chance that I lose this money later on, but I can also gain it back. It's only a money stat increase whenever I withdraw it and can no longer trade/speculate/gamble with it. Whenever you learn something, that's a stat increase. I don't trade on much information at all, but I do listen to hours and hours of stock market related information each day. Not only am I gathering information, but I'm also hunting for tidbits. Sometimes one finance channel will mention something that no other channels did, and that something leads me to making a nice swing trade later on. So this is another example of increasing the investor stat. Real estate is also included here, since obviously that's an investment. When I fork out a large deposit for a house, that decreases the money stat, but it increases the investment stat, since I've put that money into an appreciating asset. Now, as for financial literacy, as mentioned, I have a more advanced approach to this than in general masses. This refers to concepts such as understanding how M2 money supply devalues the purchasing power of our currency over time, how certain assets are impacted by political/economical factors, etc. So as an example, I think it's way more mainstream now that everyone realizes printing heaps of money, coupled with no correlated output, raises prices. Many people know this now after the whole pandemic situation where central banks around the world printed a boatload of money to keep the economy afloat. What some people don't realize is whenever money is printed, it tends to hit asset prices first, such as stocks and real estate. Now, the governments want some level of inflation in the economy, as the idea is it encourages spending. Heresy Financial argues we don't need inflation to encourage spending, but the idea behind inflation encouraging spending is, if prices went down over time, why would you buy that house now? It'll be cheaper next year. Yeah, maybe some people need shelter now, but for the most part people would just wait. Same with a holiday. Why spend now? Just wait for it to be cheaper next year. Now in some cases, like food and transportation, people will obviously spend now. But for the most part, if prices kept decreasing each year, people would stop spending. So the theory is, if prices increase each year, why wait to spend? It'll be more expensive next year, so spend now. That's the idea behind it. So given this fact, the price of assets only increases year on year too. Well, for the most part. So putting your money in appreciating assets earlier on makes you money, generally, each year, as the value of that asset goes up. Now, of course, asset prices fluctuate, just look at the stock market, but in most cases, stocks and real estate is cheaper today than it will be in 5 years, and most certainly it's cheaper now than it'll be in 10 years. So get in at your earliest convenience. This is the primary reason why I'm working 7 days a week. The extra money isn't to just flash around, it's not to say, oh look at me, I'm on that Sigma grind. It's so I can say in 3 years from now, hey look, I have my own nice house. In 3 years from now, the prices of houses in Australia are going to be higher than they are now, primarily due to increased migration, so it's best I get in earlier. The additional money from working a second job helps fund this. I could fare just fine with my full-time accounting job, living at home for ages. I'm not fussed about the whole societal stigma of living with your parents after a certain age. Anyone under the age of 35 understands how expensive houses have become, but for me, I see it as a house on land is an appreciating asset. The sooner I get in, the sooner I can reap the financial gains from it. I can get in earlier by working my weekend job. I wouldn't be doing anything super interesting every weekend anyway, so may as well work and gain access to this appreciating asset ASAP. So it's not like my line of thinking is, I need to work now so I'm not living at home with mummy and daddy when I'm 30. It's more so, real estate is as cheap as it'll ever be, so the sooner I get into this asset, the better. Now, maybe real estate doesn't function this way in your country, so if you're watching this getting spooked out that you're not working 7 days a week and have no real estate, calm down. Assess the factors relating to real estate in your country. Now, I could afford 2 properties in Perth for the cost of my 1 home in Victoria, but that's a video for another time. I'll call it something along the lines of the truth behind real estate investors. Crux of that video will involve the hidden advantages that many real estate investors have, as well as the fact that they may have 3 properties, but they're all not that flash. But I'll elaborate on those points in that video. Case in point, understanding how the financial system works is also an increase to your investor stat. Not just making swing trades, buying into long-term stock holds, buying into real estate, etc. Now this stat is important because if I didn't have any investor stat acumen at all, and I was just keeping all my money in my bank, although it's a good idea due to the high savings rates at the moment, I'd be paying a lot more down the track for a house because the cost of it would have just gone way up in that time. So my investor stat has quite literally saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future by acting early. It's also going to pay dividends in the future in relation to the stock market by understanding what's going on in the financial markets and global politics. I know for a fact that my oil stocks are going to be way higher in 2+ years, so getting in now allows me to magnify my money way more than what my superannuation account or bank interest would produce. So another example is if you did like engineering or medicine or something as your career, you probably aren't learning how the economy works, right? So that's why investor needs to be separate. You know, if you've got some money as a student and you're like, yeah, I don't know what to do with this, maybe I'll just spend it on some extravagant getaway just for the sake of it. Well, think again, because maybe you might want to put that into an appreciating asset that'll be valued a lot higher in the future. I mean, maybe you want to enjoy yourself, but if you really weren't that keen on the getaway, then maybe an investment would be a better choice. So that's why this whole investor stat is separate to your career, because your career, in many cases, isn't going to teach you stuff like this. And unfortunately, no matter what career path you choose, we're all impacted by the global economy. So investor stat is important. That's why it's a stat in the game of life. It affects us all. No matter what career you choose, no matter how good you look in the gym, no matter how much money you have in your bank account, we're all impacted by the global economy and the financial system. Stat 6, brand. This refers to having a well-known brand name. A common example for kids these days is influencers. Their names are well known in some cases, example Logan Paul. I hate the cunt to be honest, but having a well-known brand name allows you to make more money by leveraging the brand name. Example, Logan Paul has his worthless drink, although I think that drink was a flop. At least in my area it was. My supermarket job has cages of these things in the back because they just didn't sell LeMayo. Another example is his boxing match, or boxing matches. Everyone knows about his boxing matches since his name is well known. If he was a small-time boxer, no one would know about it. People knowing about it means the sponsors for the event are willing to pay a higher amount of money to advertise their products on ads relating to the event, since Logan Paul, a well-known name, is in that fight. So a lot of people are going to watch. If I was to be in a fight, no sponsors are going to pay top dollar to advertise since no one knows who I am. My name is not well known. If I sold a drink, no one would buy it since no one knows the brand name. I mean, Prime didn't really sell in my area, but you get the point. Having a well-known brand name allows you to receive money from sponsors and your audience. Kim Kardashian was paid to promote a crypto scam. Why wasn't I paid to promote a crypto scam? Because no one knows who I am. I mean, I wouldn't compromise my integrity, but I never had the opportunity to pump and dump crypto since no one knows my brand name. The Rock and Mr. Beast had started some businesses, and they did well from the start. Yeah, maybe they had some business acumen in them, but it was mostly since they had a well-known brand name. AKA Jimmy Donaldson equals Mr. Beast, Dwayne Johnson equals The Rock. Most people know of them, so when they make a burger restaurant or a tequila drink, people will be more inclined to buy this over some new business they've never heard of. I've mentioned the list of sponsors I'd take in this video here. I've told you all that since in the off chance I get big enough and I start taking sponsors, I don't want anyone thinking I'm a sellout. Well, maybe I would be, but I do use many of the products that are sponsored here on YouTube already, so it's not like I'd throw my audience under the bus for a quick buck. Example, I don't play video games in general, least of all on my phone, so chances are I wouldn't take a Raid Shadow Legends sponsorship. Could you imagine being a guy who talks about career, money, stocks, gym, etc., and then turns around and tells you to play a video game on your phone? This sponsor makes sense for a video game related channel, but not for me. A stock trading platform makes sense for a finance channel, but not a fitness channel. Although, I have seen some finance channels take like fitness sponsorships like a supplement or a drink, and I'm really not a fan of that at all. It's like, stay in your lane, bro. You have no idea whether this product is actually good or not. But anyway, if I have 100 YouTube subscribers, what are the chances of getting a Gymshark sponsorship? None at all. If I had 1 million subscribers, the chances of getting a Gymshark sponsorship drastically increases, since my brand name tells Gymshark that they'd be able to get some sales off my audience, so the investment in me is worth it for them. Alternatively, you could start your own clothing brand. If you had 100 subscribers, chances are you'd make no sales. If you had 1 million subscribers, chances are you'd make a fair bit of sales. Now, a large brand name also applies to YouTube specifically in the case of AdSense. If a lot of people know your brand name, more people will watch your videos, and thus, the more AdSense you'd get. If you're thinking, you greedy grub, wouldn't you make enough money from your sponsors? Why do you need to put ads on your videos too? The answer is, not only do I need to be compensated for all the effort I put into growing a brand name, but YouTube is going to put ads on your videos anyway, as shown in this video here. So I may as well be the one making money, not Google. They have enough. Plus, I'm sure there are YouTube ad blockers out there if it annoys you that much. I have YouTube Premium that I got for a cheaper rate using a VPN, a sponsorship I would take since I've used one, rerouting to Argentina where their inflation is nuts and is devaluing their currency, so it's cheaper for me as an Aussie to pay for it in Argentinian pesos than Aussie dollars, so I personally don't get any ads. But anyway, back to a large audience / well-known brand name. If I have 100 subscribers and I decide to sell resume templates, diet plans, clothing, and promoting a stock trading platform in which I get kickbacks for people signing up using my link in the description, then what is the likelihood I made any money from this? Likelihood is 0, because I barely have any audience at all. If I had 1 million subs, what are the chances I make money from this? Very likely, since people know my brand name. It's good advertising having a well-known brand name. This also applies to marketing. If I had the example of a stock platform linked in my brand pages, I'm more likely to have someone sign up if I have more people who know my brand name. Same goes with the Amazon affiliate program. Getting kickbacks from some links for some products. Getting kickbacks from some links for products works best if you actually have people watching your content or seeing your content. Maybe you're big on Instagram and not YouTube, for example. You see this with actors in Hollywood too. The big movies always cast the big names, the well-known brand names. You don't see the Avengers casting a bunch of people no one's heard of. Now, yes, they all started in their own respective movies for the most part. Like what Black Widow was after Endgame, for example, but we all had like Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, whatever before the Avengers. But Chris Pratt wasn't a no-name before he got casted in Guardians of the Galaxy. He had a well-known brand name before he got into the movies with a higher income potential like the Marvel movies or Jurassic World. If I have a brand name with an audience of 100 people, how much are sponsors willing to pay me? Probably not much, if anything at all. If I have an audience of 1 million people, how much will sponsors pay me to promote their products? A lot more than if I had 100 people, that's for sure. So I've used many examples for the purposes of this stat. It's scalable income. Yes, you can make good money from a career, but in most cases you are paid on an hourly basis, or you're paid a salary but you need to work many hours in order to earn that salary. Example, being those working in investment banking or public accounting. Yes, the salary can be quite juicy once you've had some years of experience, but in many cases you're working well north of 60 hours a week, often 90 to 100 in investment banking, in order to earn that salary. As I mentioned in the end part of my aesthetics section, you're draining all your other stats in order to pump up your career and money in this case. Now, maybe they use this extra money to pump into assets like stocks and real estate, and then are able to take it easier in the future, especially since they've had work experience to work, especially given they have the work experience to work in almost any job they want in that related field. And since they had money in investments early, they now have another stream of income so that they don't need to work as hard. But if you're like me, you don't have this opportunity given your location. Now, I elaborate on this in either a video I'm about to make or a video I've already made. Currently, I have the scripts ready to go for 2 videos, this being one of them, but I'm unsure which one I'll work on first. But for the sake of this video, me personally, I can't work high up in public accounting or investment banking due to my location. It would hamper my life way too much. If you think this is an excuse, then watch that video or wait for it to come out. But remember, you're talking to a guy that works 7 days a week. Pretty sure excuses aren't in my playbook. Anyway, case in point, your career money is paid due to a number of hours worked. There are only 168 hours in a week. You can't work 169 hours in a week. Lol, nice. And you obviously need time to sleep and whatnot, so your income from a career is capped. Although depending on your career, this can be a pretty damn high cap. With investments, the money you receive is only a percentage portion of your initial investment. If my oil stocks go up 100% in 2 years, my investment has doubled. Pretty good. But if I only had $1,000 invested, that's only $1,000 of extra value I gained in 2 years. Houses going up in value reaps you more benefits than stocks generally due to leverage. Example, home value is $600,000. You don't have this money lying around to buy a house, hence why you get a mortgage from the bank. You borrow this money to buy that asset. If that $600,000 house goes up by 10%, which is very likely, that asset is now worth $660,000. You don't owe the bank any extra money due to the asset going up. You still owe whatever you borrowed, plus interest, but you now have an asset worth an extra $60,000. The stock trade went up by 100%, the real estate trade only went up by 10%. But because the real estate is valued at a higher amount, the amount you received is a higher amount than the stock trade, despite the percentage increase being not as large. So, career is capped based on hours worked. Investments are capped based on the dollar amount of the investment as well as the percentage increase. But with the brand, the ceiling is way, way higher. Example, if I have 1 million subscribers / followers, whatever, and I sell a diet and workout plan for $50, or I sell a resume, cover letter, and interview prep guide for $50, or if I sell some clothes at a $50 profit margin, or I sell my stock trading ideas in a guide for $50, whatever. The point is I'm selling something that'll make me $50 per sale. If I have 1 million subs and 0.1% of my audience buys it, that's 1,000 people. If 1,000 people buy something for $50, I've just made $50,000. Try making that with salary jumps at your career. Not likely, at least not likely for many years, and depending on your career choice, maybe you can't make this kind of salary increase at all. But that's only 0.1%, and that's also assuming an audience of 1 million people. Let's say you have an audience of 1 million people, but now 1% of your audience buys your product instead of 0.1%. That's now $500,000 you've just made. Now let's also pump this up further. If you have an audience of 2 million people and 2% of them buy your $50 product, 2% of 2 million is 40,000. If 40,000 people pay for a $50 product, that's $2 million. Now, what career gets you a $2 million salary? Sure, there are a few, but they're very unlikely. They're more than likely executive positions at really large companies, but to get here, you need to bust your ass for years on end at the sacrifice of other stats. What kind of investment gets you a $2 million return? Not even large real estate moguls get this. Well, not in that short time frame anyway. Probably not in 1 year. If you have a massive audience, it's probably not unrealistic to sell something to 2% of them in the span of a year. So this is why brand is a stat in the game of life. It gives you a much higher ceiling of income potential, whether that be from affiliate marketing, selling stuff, being sponsored, or other methods I haven't discussed here. Having a well-known brand name allows you a much higher income potential than working a job/career or investments. Now, of course, the likelihood of this actually happening is much lower than the other two stats, as I've discussed before. So have the stable, reliable income sources first, and then do this on the side. Stat 7, mental health. Probably the most important stat in the game of life. You probably don't need me to tell you what this is about, but it's about being happy, being content with what you have. I go off the motto, proud but never satisfied. If you had told 18-year-old me that you'd be earning around $111,000 a year and have a body like what I have now, I'd be like, that's way more than I ever thought I could achieve. Let alone the knowledge on the stock market, the brand, the real estate, pursuing the advanced education, etc. But I'm here now, I have that, and I'm still not done. I'm still pursuing more. I'm proud of what I've achieved, but I'm not satisfied. I need more. Now that's just me. Maybe you've done enough, and you're content and happy. Legit, nothing wrong with that. Many people work the standard 9 to 5 and then enjoy their weekends. You do you. I showcase my grind and my life as an example of what you can do, not what you should do. You do whatever makes you happy. So this stat is somewhat a catch-all. Whenever you're not on the grind and you're chilling out, usually this is a mental health stat increase. Despite what you may think, I'm not a robot. I do go out with friends from time to time. Although these days, going out refers to getting dinner and then going home, not the clubs. But a dinner event with my friends costs me money, as we need to pay for the food. It hinders aesthetics, since it's not part of my diet, and generally I go quite a bit over my caloric allotment. It's time away from my study, so my career stat is hampered, or at least it's not increased. It's time away from my brand, since I'm not recording audio, editing audio, making images for my YouTube videos, or any other social media account, so my brand stat isn't increasing, and I'm not sitting there with the stock market videos playing. I'm chatting with my friends, so my investor stat isn't going up either. And the money spent on food is less money for investments, so there's another hindrance to that stat. So for all intents and purposes, hanging out with friends is a massive hindrance to your stats in the game of life. Or is it? What about stat 7, your mental health? Once you consider this stat, you realize this is not a waste of time. This is not a stat hindrance. You are still progressing in life by hanging out with your friends and family. It's increasing your mental health stat, the most important stat of all. Many people do the whole journaling, meditating. I don't, since I don't need it, nor do I even want to do it. But if you do this, that's a mental health stat increase. The time you spend meditating, I'm spending working on my brand or study. Or maybe you meditate at like 11 a.m. whilst I'm at work, so whilst you're meditating, I'm at work. Whatever. Case in point, the time you spend meditating is a stat increase if you feel you need it. Time you spend watching Netflix, playing video games, these are mental health stat increases. Now, you need to be careful. Don't be one of those treat yourself people who treat themselves at every possible point. Just because you work today, that doesn't warrant a 5-hour video game session. You should do what you enjoy, but your mental health stat isn't the only stat. Yes, it's the most important, but it's not the only one. I tell you what, studying for exams when I was at uni wasn't the best way to increase my mental health stat. The best way to increase that stat was just to not study. Now, I paid the price for this, as mentioned before, so being lazy with my study earlier in my degree hindered my life progression by a few years. So you do have times where you need to put your mental health on the back burner, in the sense that you need to do some hard yards, but don't grind yourself into an early grave. I'll use some other examples. If you spend all your time playing video games and watching Netflix instead of going to the gym, not working out, or not getting skills into a career, or just not working at all, in 5 years from now, how good will your mental health stat be? When people like me, who don't really have money problems other than saving for a house that I technically can already afford, story for another time, people like me who look good, people like me who work in a job they actually like, whilst you have nothing to show for the last 5 years of your life other than being able to recite some TV series on Netflix and showing some video game stats, how good would this make you feel then? Probably not very good. Now, yeah, obviously you don't compare yourself to others and whatnot and you live your own life and all that, but the point is you can't just do stuff that makes you happy all the time. Like if I did that, you would have never heard of me because I wouldn't have started this brand. I would have just been playing video games. And even if I did start this brand, no one would listen to me because I wouldn't be in shape. I wouldn't have any money. I'd have no career. I wouldn't know a thing about the stock market. I would have just been playing video games. I'd be some low-key Twitch streamer. So, although it seems I'm flip-flopping all over the place, mental health is most important. But then I say, oh no, you need to work. And then I say, yeah, nah, your mental health will suck if you don't work. There is a theme here, and I'll explain. You do need to do some work, unless you're a trust fund baby, fuck those people. But don't work hard around the clock at the expense of your mental health. You do need some enjoyment from time to time. If you worked all week, got in a few study sessions and some gym sessions, that's plenty of work done for 1 week. By all means, play some video games, watch some movies, hang out with friends, enjoy yourself. You earned it. But if you worked 3 hours in total this week, skipped gym, didn't really study, and spent the whole time playing video games, now this is a problem. Yes, your mental health stat is drastically increased since you're spending a lot of time doing what you enjoy most, but you're doing this at the expense of your career stat, your money stat, your aesthetic stat, your investment stat, and your brand stat. If you care about investments and brand, that is, I'd strongly argue everyone should have career, money, and aesthetics. Money and career is separate since when you're in uni, chances are you're not working in a job in your career field. I'd try to get one if you can, but if your circumstances are like mine when I was at uni, this isn't feasible. So you should work while you're at uni or work while you're doing whatever you want to do as a career. I just keep using uni as an example since it's the example I best know how to describe. You could be doing self-study. You could be working on your brand instead. One guy I was talking to is working on becoming an actor, which is pretty sick. So whatever you're doing, I'd argue you should have a career stat, money stat, and aesthetic stat alongside mental health. You can have a great life without the investor stat or brand stat. It just makes things a little easier down the track if those two stats play out right. Anyway, back to the point. You've played video games all week, made your bump to the mental health stat, but at what cost? Alternatively, you did some sort of productive stuff every single waking moment possible, but you hate study. You're just doing it as a means to an end, but you're still 4+ years away from graduating yet. You spend a lot of time in the gym, but it's just to look better. You'd rather gym 3 days a week, not 6. So yes, this week you increased a lot of stats, by a lot, except mental health, since you didn't enjoy parts of the grind. So in this case, I'd suggest gymming less and studying less, and using that extra time for whatever you like doing, so the grind is more enjoyable. Notice how I said less and not at all? I said study less than what you were doing, I didn't say don't study at all. I said gym less, not stop going to the gym and instead spend all that time playing video games. There's a balance here. The diversified grind. Don't be a one-trick pony. Have a few things going for yourself. Now for me, I like my supermarket job on the weekends. I enjoy learning about the stock market. I enjoy working on my brand. I enjoy gym. But I still do have social events for the mental health stat. If you're a regular, you know I watch nostalgic video game stuff, or at least stuff unrelated to the 5 main stats in my life before bed. It helps me reset, unwind, takes my mind away from the hustle and bustle of life. If I was a Sigma male hustle mode grind set, I'd still be checking stocks or nutrition or CPA lectures or whatever right before bed. But I don't. Right before bed is pure chill out time. I mean, if I do anything hustle mode before bed, I tend to wake up in the middle of the night since my brain is subconsciously like, why are you asleep? You could be learning. So in a way, the video game stuff before bed is a strategic aesthetic stat increase since it allows me to have a full sleep, so my body can recover from gym and prepare for the next day ahead. So, to summarize, the mental health stat is the most important stat of all. However, there's a line between living your best life and enjoying yourself and doing what's needed to progress in the other stats so your mental health is better later in life. Delayed gratification, one might say. I assure you, if your career, money, and aesthetic stat get improved over the span of 5 years, it increases your mental health stat way more than any amount of movies, playing video games, meditating, etc. will do in that same 5-year time span. So that's a summary of the key stats in the game of life. Hopefully, you're now better prepared to play this game. Remember, your IRL stats matter way more than any video game stats. That is all.